Okay, I'd like everyone to conjure up the following image in their mind. You need to close your eyes and listen, otherwise do the best you can. Rebbe Nachman is suffering from tuberculosis, a disease that hits the lungs. He has a little bit more than 2 months to live. That's it. Then it's already passed from this world. He can barely speak. It's hard for him to get the words out. He's in Uman, a town that has been basically taken over by the Maskilim, who are adamant about taking away Jews from believing in God. He's living in the house of a man who went to great lengths to make sure that the name of God was never mentioned within the 4 walls of that dwelling. That man had passed away. Now Rebbe Nachman is living in that house. He's under a government that's hostile to the Jews. He's in a place where there'd been a horrible massacre of Jews in the exile. So he's a man who's limited in time. He's limited in audience. He's had some chassidim who came to him, but I don't know how many. But that's only a number of people came to visit him here on that Shabbos. He's limited in influence. Maskilim are the influential ones. He doesn't have the governmental connections that they have. He's limited in power. He's limited in physical capability. He's limited. And he even says to his chassidim, I'm limited in knowledge. He said, I don't know why he came to me this time. If I had something to teach you, fine, but I don't have anything more to teach you. I'm done, he says. So I have nothing left to teach. I'm a simple man, a prustik, if I pronounce that correct. That's how he said. And from within this limitation, I want to read out the following words, if I can find them. Again, we're quoting from Rabbi Ebner, quoting from the editor of Likutey Moharan. I assume that this is the first editor. He, Rebbe Nachman, drew out these words and said them with great force and wondrous, awesome depth. At some point, Rebbe Nachman transformed from someone who was saying over and over again, I don't have anything to teach you. I'm just a simple Jew now. I have nothing. I don't have any thoughts, any ideas. He transformed from that person to somebody who's alive, it sounds like. And he's drawing out these words, either because to say a word is difficult for him because his lungs are being deteriorated, or he's drawing them out to emphasize what he's about to say. In order to teach and to signal every person in all generations, every person, right? He has something now. He has this chassid, I have nothing to teach you. But I have something now. I have to teach you guys. I have something to teach everybody. I, Rebbe Nachman, who have a couple months left, who has a very little bit amount of strength, who have no influence. I don't have. There's no Facebook, and there's no TikTok, and I don't have any influence. I don't have any power. I now, in this place, am going to speak to everybody, he says. In all generations, and everybody, I believe and understand, is not just a reference to the Jewish people, Jews and non-Jews. I, Rebbe Nachman, recognize that he has a message. What does he want to tell them? Not to despair in any way, even should the most dire things happen to him. So let us think about this for a second. Rebbe Nachman is transcending, he says, time and space. And it turns out, as we'll see in a second, that he's right. We'll get that in one moment. He's transcending all the limitations of time and space to speak to everyone and tell them, as we already heard, there's no room for despair. Now, it's an introduction to the Torah, and we're going to go through this. It won't just talk about despair, talk about a lot of things in this Torah. And we go through it step by step, but this one point, let us think about this. Isn't this a beautiful example of how there's no room to despair? Isn't this Torah itself an example of the Torah? Because here you are, there's every reason to think that it's, what am I supposed to, what for? I have a few chassidim, I don't have any ideas left. I'm gone anyway. I barely have any strength. The mosquitoes are taking over everywhere. The government hates us. We're still in exile. And from within that massive amounts of limitation, he breaks out from all that to, infinity, to everywhere, to go to speak to everyone in every place and every time. There's no room for despair. It doesn't matter if he can't see it, but he knew it. I like to suggest, I think he knew it. And that's why he became alive. Now, I asked ChatGPT, I asked it, how far-reaching is Rebbe Nachman's teaching that there's no despair? That was the wrong question to ask. But I'm still going to read the answer, and then I'll get to the right question. Wrong in terms of what I was trying to figure out. But I think the answer is still interesting. Rebbe Nachman's teaching that there is no despair at all. Ein shum yeush ba'olam klal is one of the most far-reaching and radical ideas in all of Hasidic thought. Not merely psychological encouragement, but a theological statement about the structure of reality itself. And what I'm trying to say with this Torah is that this Torah, the existence of this Torah, in the context in which it was created, is an example of this theological reality, that this structure exists in reality. It reaches from the individual soul's darkest moment all the way up to the metaphysical nature of creation and divine concealment. Now, that's quite a statement. Let me read that again. This Torah reaches from the individual soul's darkest moments. I want to stop here. I understand this line, I want to understand this line, but I want to conjure up another image. It's an image we all have heard of and know, the Simpson, that there's an all-encompassing light. And then there's a halal, a space within that light. And then there's a ray of light that pierces through that to the center, or I don't know, to the center, but within wherever it goes to, within the halal. Now, if you're inside the halal, and this might not be, I'm not holding by Kabbalah. I had friends who delve quite a bit to it. I discuss it with them at times. I've learned a little bit here and there. So I'm not saying that this is, what I'm about to say is representative of what this image means or indicates. But imagine within that halal, you would think that darkness is everything. Everywhere you look, before that ray of light comes in, you're in the center of it. The ray of light hasn't pierced through yet. And you look in the distance, all you see is darkness. You turn around, you look up, you look down. You are surrounded by darkness. And you would think and believe and experience that is reality. But then in comes this ray of light and pierces through there. And that ray of light is connected to this infinite light. And now if you're able to draw that light in, so then you show who envelops who, or what envelops what. It's the darkness that's enveloped by the light, not the other way around. And that's how I'm able to bring that light into there. So if I'm in the darkest moments of the worst despair, and I live this reality, there's no such thing as Yeush. So I'm bringing light into that point. I'm saying it doesn't matter how all-encompassing you get, how powerful you are, how much of control you seem to be. Once I am living the reality that there's more to this, I brought light into there. I heard of this psychologist, right, who I understand works, I don't know if he works in Mossad or the Shabak, and that he was one of the first people to meet the hostages, I understand. That's what I at least was told. He said that Hirsch, and I forgot how to pronounce the last name, that one of the hostages that's already didn't make it back. But many hostages said that he gave them hope by quoting Viktor Frankl, who we will quote in a minute, about how, not despairing, basically. and that you can even find purpose in the worst circumstances, which means that it doesn't matter how much they frighten you. It doesn't matter how much they physically hurt you. It doesn't matter how many of your brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, sons and daughters they've murdered and butchered. There is still a light you can find there. There is still your own neshama. They try to convert many of these Jews, and they refuse to. We'll give you more food. We'll make it easier for you. They wouldn't do it. That's that ray of light coming in there, and therefore that's part of the structural reality. Maybe I can better articulate that another time. Let's go on here. Key points, ontological scope. For Rebbe Nachman, despair isn't just a feeling, it's an illusion. Since God's presence, Ein Sof, fills and sustains every point of existence, true hopelessness cannot exist. I'm going to put this in my own terms. It doesn't matter how strong the darkness gets, how evil man becomes. It cannot extinguish that light of tikva. That light's going to burn. It doesn't have the ability to reach there. Darkness itself is another form of divine concealment, not absence. Because that's interesting. When things are dark, it's not that God's not there, it's that he's concealed. That's a very interesting distinction. Spiritual practice. No despair becomes a discipline of the soul, commanded to seek Kadosh Baruch Hu, precisely in hiddenness, to believe that even distance is a path towards closeness. So this is what's really fascinating right here. A discipline of the soul. There's a whole rational approach to reality, which is very powerful and very helpful in the right circumstances. But there's another part of reality where rational analysis, linear thinking, definitions, all that is just not relevant. When you're dealing with the experience of reality, with the emotions of reality, perhaps you can have a framework which is logically and rationally explained to you. But in terms of practice and exercise, there is spiritual and emotional exercise you have to go through that all the logic and explanation won't help if you don't do the work yourself. And I think a great example of this is exercise. If I read books about the benefits of exercise, if I give courses on it, if I understand all the science behind it, it won't turn me into a healthy person if I don't eat well, I don't sleep well, I don't exercise well. So they're not despairing is not necessarily our natural initial psychological state or spiritual state. It's something that we have to learn to live, to actually live. There's the phrase sometimes, is somebody religious or not? Are they frum or not? Who knows what they would do in the tunnels of Gaza, Lo Aleinu, except for those hostages that went through it? We don't know what we would do in these circumstances. We could prepare ourselves. We could, train ourselves, connect ourselves. But if you're not tested, you don't know. None of us know. It's not a criticism. It's not. If there's a strenuous physical or situation, you could work out quite a bit. If there's an epidemic, are you going to make it through that or not? Who knows? There are challenges, but maybe that's not the best example. The point I'm trying to get to here is that a discipline of the soul is that there's something we have to work on in terms of being the person who doesn't despair, just like I have to work on my health. Let's continue. We'll say more another time. Psychological healing reframes personal suffering and failure. Right? Personal suffering and failure connected, right? But there's all sorts of ways to be in pain: physical, psychological, emotional. Every fall, he teaches, contains a seed of ascent. You read in the Torah, Aliyah, descent for the sake of elevation. There are failings in the world. Why do they exist? Why is that part of God's creation? Because there's a seed of aliyah in there. You have to think about this you go more at another time. But if that's the case, why would you despair by your suffering? Why would you despair by your failures? There is something to be built in there. Now, there is an interesting thing, if heaven forbid we're in a situation like the Shoah, where you have murder en masse, and those individuals will not be able to do an ascent afterwards because, for understandable reasons. But the Jewish people can. We're aware of them. We're aware of the Holocaust, and it affects us, and it transforms us, and we do work we wouldn't have done otherwise. It's always a difficult thing to say. No one wishes this to be the way that we do it. But once we are aware of the pain and the suffering and the failures and the horrors, we respond. And if we respond, often, at least, those who are in tune with the Derech of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Torah, and have received this worldview, they respond positively, constructively, helpfully. So there is an ascent, even if it's not by the particular person who the evil happened to, but it exists within the situation if we broaden our perspective. A difficult topic, obviously. Historical vision. Applied to the Jewish people, it transforms exile itself into a stage of redemption. Right? Exile is a stage. But even when Torah, faith, or moral clarity seem extinguished, the spark persists. But I think it's also that when you're in exile, you awaken the desire and the work to get back to where you want to be. And so that exile is not the end. It is the spurring of a process. Universal reach. His language, every person in every generation, shows that this teaching transcends the boundaries of Jewish experience. It addresses the human condition itself, the struggle to find meaning where none appears. I think of a video I saw, not about this topic, but I'm going to borrow it and bring it here. So an experiment they did with monkeys and 5-year-old boys. I don't know if they're orangutans or I think they're chimpanzees, intelligent animals, and they're boys. They had 3 bowling pins. All looked the same, all felt the same in terms of weight and everything. But one of them was weighted, the weight was off a little bit. That's be important. We'll get to that in a second. The task was simple, to stand all 3 up. 1, 2, 3. The monkeys or the chimpanzees have been trained to do this. The boys were told to do this. They do the first one, no problem. The second one, no problem. The third one tips over because it's weighted more on one side than the other. So you can't actually stand it up. But you don't realize that when you look at it and feel it. It looks and feels just like the other ones. So the chimpanzee will say, when it falls, tries again. It falls, he tries again. Over and over again. Just keeps trying and trying. 10, 15, 20. He won't stop. He's supposed to stand. That's what I'm supposed to do. Just keeps going. The boy tries 2, 3 times. Doesn't work. He picks it up and he starts looking at it. He starts trying to figure out what's going on. Why isn't it working? Am I missing something? He's curious. He's inspecting. He's thinking. That's built in, that curiosity, that perspective is built into the human being. In a similar fashion, the struggle to find meaning where none appears is built into the human condition. And that's part of what Rebbe Nachman is saying. There's no such thing as despair because there's something there. There's a growth there. There's a process there. There's an ability there. There's an opportunity there. And so all this, if you look at all this evil and darkness that's growing and you focus on the evilness of it, the darkness of it, you're being blinded. That's there to help you discover some meaning that you didn't realize you had to discover. Now, it doesn't appear because I don't see the whole reason why you have to go into search is because you're so blinded to that opportunity in the first place. Perhaps, but when these difficulties are awakening you up to go on a search. Let's understand this again. This phrase is so well said. The struggle to find the meaning doesn't mean you're going to find it, but you're going to struggle with it. It's going to shake you up. I like to use another vision. Imagine you wake up in the middle of the night. You have to go to the bathroom. So you get up and you start walking. You know exactly what you're doing. You know exactly where you're going. Exactly what you need and want. And on the way, you stub your toe. And what do you do then? You stop and you scream. And you deal with and focus on the pain. Now, a second ago, you were on your path. You thought you knew where you're going. You thought you knew what you were doing and where you're trying to head. And you may need to get back to that path. In this case, you will. But the pain stops us and forces us to focus on the difficulty of the moment. That's built into pain and suffering in this world. And that stopping, that crying out, and that dealing with, that's one of the reasons why there is no Yeush, I would like to suggest, having not gone through this Torah inside yet, just having heard it mentioned in multiple times in multiple ways. Now, I'm going to leave. This has been a bit long. Hopefully you're still with me. I'm going to leave with my follow-up question to ChatGPT. And then we'll tie it all up. How influential has this been to the Jewish world and in the non-Jewish world? That's what I asked my second question. That's what I meant to ask the first time. How far-reaching is it? By far-reaching, I meant beyond Brussels and beyond, but I didn't articulate it very well. So I made it more specific. How influential has it been to the Jewish world and the non-Jewish world? So ChatGPT says that this teaching, that there is no despair at all, has become one of the most enduring and cross-cultural ideas in modern spirituality. Yeah. This idea has been one of the most enduring and cross-cultural ideas in modern spirituality. Now, let's understand there's a lot of ideas in modern spirituality. There's the Muslim movement, and there's the Tanya, and there's the Chaim, and there's a lot out there, a lot, in Jewish philosophy, and there's a lot there. But this one idea that Rebbe Nachman says in Uman, 2 months before he's going to die, with almost no strength and a small little following, and with this recognition that he's speaking to everyone. This looks like that idea has spoken to everyone. Within Judaism, it has shaped entire generations of Hasidic and non-Hasidic thinkers. And beyond Judaism, it has entered the global vocabulary of faith, resilience, and meaning through literature, psychology, and music. Within the Jewish world, among Breslovers, this phrase became a spiritual anthem, the beating heart of hitbodedut, personal prayer, and of joy born from brokenness. Right? That I think we said before that hitbodedut is self-referential prayer, or self-revealing prayer. So that's a better definition, I think, than personal prayer. Hitbodedut, to be alone, be alone with oneself in a davening state, and a joy born from brokenness. I have a song that hopefully someday I'll get out there called "Better Beautiful Days." I think about beautiful days will come from your pain. There can be a beauty, a joy, an opportunity that comes from pain, when we figure out how to deal with that. It deeply influenced 20th century Jewish thought, from Rav Kook's theology of constant renewal Shagar's postmodern faith, and Rabbi Steinsaltz's insistence on human potential. So I don't know enough about. I don't even know who Rabbi Shagar is. Maybe I should. I know Steinsaltz from the Gemaras, and I know a little bit about Rav Kook's theology, but I personally have not connected to it so much. Although people tell me some of my ideas are definitely in that there's parallels to what he has to say. So but so constant renewal. I have to think about somebody maybe who knows more about me could explain how that is, but it's gotten in there. Modern Israeli culture quoted everywhere. And this is what's so interesting. On posters, songs, and speeches, as shorthand for Jewish endurance, tikva in exile, survival after the Shoah, national rebirth. It doesn't mention all the wars and terrorism we have to deal with here, but I imagine that's one of the reasons why it has such appeal, because for modern Jews, Israel, I mean, leaving since post World War II and leaving the Soviet Union out, the modern Israeli anti-Semitic violence has been focused mostly in Israel, and so this idea of there's no Yeush, I guess I assume that might be one of the reasons why it speaks so well here. Although I didn't phrase it so well, but we'll leave that out. Beyond the Jewish world, Nachman's writings, especially the tales of Rabbi Nachman and the empty chair, have been translated to dozens of languages. Maybe that's for the Jews knows the languages, maybe, and written interfaith and secular settings, which that's kind of interesting. Thinkers like Martin Buber, Avraham Joshua Heschel, and even Carl Jung drew from his psychological depth and vision of paradox, finding joy and meaning within brokenness. It's the Carl Jung part, which I find interesting because in modern psychology, there's two foundational pillars. There's Freud, who I asked about, and there's no direct connection with Freud, or no indirect past that ChatGPT knew about, but they see parallels in the need to bring awareness of the hidden self. But that we'll say for another time. Carl Jung drew from his psychological depth. I'm sorry. So Carl Jung was the other. Carl Jung is the other pillar, and you can imagine if Carl Jung, who I believe studied I think he liked the Magen Medrash quite a bit. If he's learning these Torahs, he wasn't Jewish Jung, and he's been bringing psychology, and it's going out to academia, into the world, and so it might have a different clothing, different garment, to be in a particular type of klipa, maybe you could say, maybe not. But that kernel, that idea, you see getting out to the world. The idea that despair is an illusion parallels existential and therapeutic insights. Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, for instance, echoes Rebbe Nachman saying that meaning is never absent, even in suffering. There's always meaning. Before we said that suffering leads us to a search. Now, different people respond to suffering differently, and we always need to be sympathetic and empathetic to those who are experiencing it. But I'm not sure where I was going with that thought. We'll leave that. I don't know if Viktor Frankl directly got it from Rebbe Nachman, but we see these parallels. So, the cultural resonance, no despair, has become almost proverbial in Israeli and Jewish art and music worldwide. A quiet counterpoint to nihilism. Isn't that interesting? I'm not sure exactly how it's a counterpoint to nihilism. Nihilism is what it is. Is destructive, or nihilistic is, I guess, is maybe you're living the despair, you're living the negativity, and you become consumed by it. And if you can't beat it, join it. I'm not sure exactly if that's true or not about nihilism, but okay, some sort of quiet counterpoint, which you have to think about more. In a broader human sense, it serves as a framework for finding God, purpose, or inner light in a secular, post-certainty age. Okay. I will just look at this one point about Freud. I'm just going to pick out a few things that I think that actually are interesting, and hopefully you're still with me on this. Conceptual resonance. Rebbe Nachman says he devoted parallel psychoanalysis as an uncovering of the hidden self through speech. So what's interesting is that what Rebbe Nachman is recognizing is that we have to get aware of ourselves. And there's a power of speech to do that. Now, Rabbi Nachman thought it was the power of praying to God while dealing with the difficulties we're going through. For Freud, it's more of a, sounds to me like an intellectual exploration and certain techniques of self. But they're both this idea that there's something to be uncovered and hidden, and that darkness is just something to be removed. It's a like a clothing or a partition that's to be removed to reveal something that's deeper there. His idea that despair and concealment are illusions that was hidden must be brought to light. That mirrors Freud's emphasis on bringing unconscious material excuse me, into awareness to heal psychic pain. That's another interesting point. His idea that despair and concealment are illusions. Now that mirrors, so in other words, despair and concealment. What's hidden must be brought to light. If you see evil and therefore you despair, you're not seeing the thing deeper going on that you need to be aware of, whether in yourself or in what's going on in the world. So too, Freud had this idea that there's things that are unconscious that you need to shed light on. And so there's these interesting parallels. Both turn inward. It's just that the path to redemption or sanity lies through confronting what is most concealed. So you can have different words for it. You're talking about being sane or insane, functional or not functional, redeemed or not redeemed. But what's going on, it has a lot of similarities. Now, I'm going to end with this last bit, and I'll probably break this up into a few different videos because it's over half an hour, I see. When did Rebbe Nachman give this Torah? Which we're still in the introductory phase, or the introduction of the introduction phase, the first step. He gave it on the Shabbos after Tisha B'Av. Now, let's sit back for a second and think about the first Shabbos after Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, I would like to suggest, if we had to find a day, gave us the most reason to despair. What better day is there than Tisha B'Av? Where we recount over and over and over again, not just all the horrors that happened to the Jewish people, but all the mistakes we made. The Meraglim and the Chet, we don't necessarily mention them directly, but we know that, say, I think the Chet was in Nitzayin, is that right? Didn't remember correctly, and the Meraglim on Tisha B'Av. So there's no greater day to show you how futile it is. We've been trying so long. All we do is we get sorrows over and over again. Look, the Crusades and the 10 martyrs and the Romans and the Holocaust and the exiles and on and on and on and on. A whole day of it, steeping ourselves into it, experiencing it, mourning. But mourning is a little bit different than certainly not despair. But if you have to choose a day that you'd say, this is despair day, this is the day that you say, there's no hope. You might think that Tisha B'Av is the day to do that. But just like Rebbe Nachman's Torah, within Tisha B'Av is one of the greatest teachings of Rebbe Nachman. Because the fact that we are here, sitting on the ground, saying kinos, remembering all this, we, the Jewish people, is the greatest indication of all that there's no reason to despair. Because what have they not thrown at us? What have they not tried? What evil have they not done? I guess, Hamas, we saw that there's always a new variation, new way that can still shock us. But at the end of the day, nothing they've done, none, whether it's the ultimate in love, the ultimate in hate, the ultimate in ignoring, doesn't make a difference. We survive. We don't just survive, we thrive. We grow, we contribute. I read somewhere, one second. I read somewhere, that if you ask some people, how many Jews are there in the world? I don't know exactly. where the survey was done or who they asked, but their perception was 50 million, 100 million. We're in the news so often. People talk about it so much. There's so many famous Jews, so many different contributions that, the assumption for many non-Jews is that this is a large people. It's quite remarkable. So we don't just survive. We thrive. We contribute in all sorts of ways. And if there's any day to realize there's no reason to despair, it's Tisha B'Av, the ultimate day. And Rebbe Nachman and Shabbos Nachamu, when we start the consolation process, once you recognize that you don't have to despair, that there's a hope, that there's something, a purpose, there's a struggle to be done. So you're already in the stage of consolation. You've already taken it one step out of the suffering. That's the day that Rebbe Nachman came up with this Torah. All right. There's a lot in that. I might put the whole thing out as one go. I might break it up. I don't know. Breaking up takes time. We'll see. But hopefully that was worthwhile for everybody. And we'll continue. All the best.